trim off the excess. And what that does is, again, that keeps from having a big bump at the back where you're tying the marabou in. I'm going to take the wire that I'm going to rib with, and I'm going to tie that in the same general place. I'm going to try and tie that on the opposite side of the hook from where I'm sitting. And push it down out of the way for the moment. And I'm going to put a little flash in the tail. So I'm going to take a piece of flash and I'm going to wrap it around the thread right at the back. And I'm going to pull it up to the hook and then tie it in on one side, not on the top, but on one side of the hook, trim it to length. I'm going to take another strand and do the same thing. Pick it up, put it on the far side of the hook this time, and tie it down. I'm going to trim it off. Then I'm going to take the, where did I put it? The other half of the marabou, and I'm going to strip a chunk of stuff off of there. And then I'm going to lay that on top of the previous one, same length. And the reason for doing this layer technique is to kind of embed that flash into the marabou tail. Now, if you want to get really fancy, I'm going to take just a few strands of red because my body's going to be a mixed color. And I'm going to stick just a small number of strands of red right on top. Makes the tail a little more complicated, but I'm doing a two-tone body, so hey, and now the hackle, wherever the hackle went. The hackle go. Where did the hackles all disappear? Pardon me while I find out where my hackles went. I had them laid out here. There we go. Go back here. So I've got a grizzly hackle, and I'm going to try and figure out where the usable part of this is. So I run them backwards, and then I kind of measure them. I want the hackle to be about the gap of the hook. I don't want to get a huge hackle. Then I'm going to strip off the fuzzy bits. And I'm going to tie this in by the fuzzy end. And I'm going to tie it in so that there's, again, about 1/8 of an inch of stem that extends past the tie-in point. Because that first wrap, if I make that first wrap with stem only, the hackle tends to turn better. All right, good. Now dubbing loops. We're going to make a dubbing loop, and I'm going to stop here for a second and show you a plethora of tools. The simplest one is a pair of hackle pliers. You can make the hackle plier, just pull your thread down, clip the hackle pliers, go up, and that works. The next one is this guy here that has that little thingy, and you're going to hook it through the little V there, and then tie it back up. The fancy ones are like this weight thing. You put it like that, and then you spin the weight and spin the daylights out of it. That works pretty good. This is another one that you just hook on the thread, make your loop, and then you can spin the whole smear with your thumb. That really works pretty well. I got this little kind of homemade looking guy here. And it's like the second one I showed you. You just hook it on the thread and it hangs. And then I'm going to make my loop up and finish it up on the thread. Now, once I've done that back to the shank of the hook, I'm going to make one turn around the two threads at the loop. And then I'm going to go, around over top. And then I'm going to go around the loop again. What that does is that closes the loop up, right up to the fly. And it's not going to let your dubbing material drop out when you start putting it in. Now, seal fur or semi-seal, I've got a range of stuff here, and I'll give you a quick look at the colors that are available that I have anyway. I've got some orange, that's seal fur, black, and this particular pattern uses black. There's a claret or purple. This is, again, black, olive, and then there's some red. And then I've got a bunch of semi-seal, that's orange. Got semi-seal or pseudo-seal in a variety of colors. And all of these dubbings are pretty spiky dubbings. They have they're fairly long fibers, but they have a lot of spikes to them. So what I've done for this particular pattern is I have pre-mixed some red and some black to give a two-tone body. I'm going to take it out. And then I'm going to take my tying thread and scoot it up here out of the way. Throw a half hitch. And just to keep everything out of the way, I'm going to put my bobbin rest over here. That's just going to make life a little easier for me. And make sure I undo that there. So now there's a nice open loop. And I'm going to take little bits of this dubbing and I'm going to slide it up in the loop all the way up to the fly. And each little next pinch of dubbing I'm going to put in the loop and I'm going to slide it all the way up to the fly. You can see kind of what I'm doing there, I hope. Does that look okay to you? Right in the middle of the loop. I'm going to pack it up pretty good. I have enough dubbing here to do a couple of flies. I make sure I get it, the fibers trapped in between those two pieces of thread as best I can. So it's a little finicky to do this. But once you get all the fibers trapped in that loop, then I'm going to take this whole shebang and it's got a bead that I can hang on to. And I'm going to spin the living daylights out of it here. A couple of bits out here I don't need. So now I'm getting a nice tight rope of dubbing. The beauty of having a rotary vise is now I don't have to fiddle with it anymore. I just wind it on. Makes a very buggy body. And when I get up to the front, time off behind the eye. And then on the front. Okay.
Dave, just before you go on, could I just ask you, make a comment?
Sure.
Do you ever use dubbing brushes?
Talk to Florin, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's something you might want to think about demonstrating one day. I was surprised that a number of the guys in the club don't know what they are. And I found them really convenient to use, especially in an application like this. So that's something you might want to think about doing another time.
I would, that's a good point. And I bet you I would get a volunteer from Florin because he was talking about doing that with dubbing brushes today.
I could almost, I'm using dubbing brushes right now, and I could probably show you right now.
Okay, well, let me finish off this.
Just have to move my camera so it actually points to the dubbing tool. Once Dave is done at the very end, I can try to show you maybe.
So now I'm gonna, to avoid trapping down hackle fibers, I'm gonna run my wire, spiral my wire up the dubbing first. And I'm gonna give it a little wiggle. And I'm just gonna get enough wraps up the hook to give the body some segmentation. So like 4, maybe 5 wraps. I should have used a little lighter wire. That stuff is pretty chunky.
Just one other comment about the dubbing brushes. I was thinking of using the vise to make dubbing brushes rather than having a dubbing brush tool, because that's kind of a complicated thing to make for people, where they can make a dubbing brush really easily just using their vise.
Yeah. This bloody wire is way too heavy. All right, and then the last thing is to palmer the hackle forward. And again, if I have that that first wrap is stem and not feather, it makes this hackle stand out really nice. Particularly at the back when you make the first wrap or two. And Denny said, Richard said to wrap it from the butt of the feather forward to the tip, wrap it tight in butt first. And he says that makes the hackle fibers stand out in a way which will cause them to have a little more action in the water. And then just a teeny bit of a thread head here. And whip finish. And that's him. So comments, questions?
So why did you put the hackle on after the wire versus the other way around?
Because the wire I'm using is really thick, and if I wrap the wire over top of the hackle, it would scrunch the hackle down.
Yeah, we did that before though, where we wiggled the hackle to minimize that. And
yeah, you can do that.
Make a more robust fly.
If it's really fine wire, you can do that. But this wire I'm using today is, you can see, is a pretty chunky wire.
Right.
And then I got my little roughing tool, my very expensive popsicle stick and Velcro tool. And I'm going to tease all this dubbing out after I do this. And you see it just fuzzes that fly up something unbelievable. That's the nice thing about this dubbing that has a lot of long fibers to it. It makes it very fuzzy. There we go.
You can tell a Northern Lights guy by the brush that he uses. I got an identical one like that from Mike Dell.
Yeah. So we're all kind of cheap, right? We find inexpensive ways of doing stuff.
Well, talking of cheap, you know, I get bugged by the waste of wire and all kinds of materials. So when I use anything like wire, for instance, to weigh a hook, I make sure that I put one of these little spool tenders on.
Mm-hmm.
And when I wrap the wire on the hook, it goes straight off the spool. I never cut pieces.
Yeah.
And I do this with all the materials. And I just ran out of thread on a bobbin. Now this bobbin gets put in a separate bag. And then if I have chenille or anything like that, any kind of material for tying, or especially for weaving, if you like to weave bodies, the floss, you just spool it yourself on the thing and then put one of these things on, and it's super handy. On tinsels, it keeps them from unraveling as well. So this is a material saver big time.
Yep.
So where do you get those little holders to keep your thread in?
You can buy them, but it's not worth it. You can make them. It's really easy. So what it is, it's elastic, and I understand it's a bit in short supply right now, but it won't last. Then you buy some beads, plastic beads, regular from a bead store.
Yep.
I probably have enough for all of you guys. It's just that online I can't send them in. And then some shrink tubing. So what you do is you super glue the elastic to the bead, and then you cover it up with some shrink tubing, and then you shrink it, and it's done.
And what would you call them? Is there a name for them?
I'm sorry?
Is there a name for those?
Spool tender.
Spool tender.
Spool tenders, and I also use them on tippet.
Yeah, you make them to go around your tippet spool.
Yeah. So you can make different sizes, and I can also tell you for different bobbins, you're gonna find out that different bobbins have different diameters, and that there are effectively about 3 different sizes of elastic that you need to cut, and you just experiment with it, and you find the magic length that gives you just enough tension.
All right. Good. Any other questions?
Dave, just a comment about the way you tied the hackle in.
Yep.
According to Denny Rickard's videos that I've seen, he says that's very critical that you tie the hackle in by the base at the tail and wind it forward. And I noticed what that does is it means that the front of your fly has shorter hackles than the back. And what Denny says is that prevents your fly from spinning, and which is important, that you don't want it to spin.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think of that.
Well, that's what I did.
Yeah, you did.
And I'm presuming, he's the guy that invented the pattern, so I'm not going to argue with it.
Well, I started using his patterns back 3 years after he published his book, and I've never had as effective a pattern as the seal bugger in all the local lakes and the interior lakes.
Cool. Now, that's all my pins here. Hi. So we'll do.
Question, Dave. This is
Yeah.
this seal bugger is basically a woolly bugger just using seal hair.
Yes, or semi-seal or whatever. Yeah.
Start again. Sorry, I didn't have my sound on. A few weeks ago, you're talking about these bobbins, and they have those little plastic ends, prevents the
Yep.
thread being cut. I had several of them, and what I did, I had retired them, didn't throw them away, but I went and took epoxy resin, mixed it up, and I put a little dab of epoxy resin on it, and you can see it there, just about, and just take a toothpick or something that you can push down the end of the unit, clean it, so there's no bumps or no epoxy piled up down there, and it solves your problem. You'll never cut it, you won't cut a thread with it.
Hey Dave, are the most productive colors for that seal bugger, are they like olive and black, and then you've mixed the tail with what is that, a red or a crimson marabou?
Yeah, if you look at the website from Denny Rickards, with the tying, he all seemed to tie the bodies as a uniform color and a tail as uniform color, but they were contrasting. Like the tail wasn't always the same color as the body. And I've seen a couple of other ones where they literally did do what I did, is they mixed the seal fur on the body to give it a variegated look. I think Phil Rowley's done that. A couple other guys have done that. So I think it's just a matter of preference. And I was just showing how to do that in case you wanted to do that yourself. And to do that, you take little pieces of the dubbing, and you take two little pinches, and then you just do this with them. Pull it apart, put it together, and it mixes it all up quite nicely. So that's what I've done here with the olive and the orange. So I'll tie this other one using an olive and an orange mixture. And I'm just showing you the more complicated exercise in case you want to do that. You can do it very simple if you're in production of tying, cranking out lots of flies. So we'll go through and do the second one here. This is olive thread. And again, I really like this little trick for starting your wire, where we just flatten the end of it a bit with a pair of pliers. I lay that down over the thread.
And what
it down.
What does flatten do again?
It makes the lead not have a great big bump where you tie it in, and the flat part, once you whapped on it, it holds it so the lead doesn't spin on you. It works really well to get that wire firmly attached to the hook without spinning as you're trying to wrap the wire down the hook shank. So sometimes if you just tied it on and loosely, and then when you start wrapping your thread, the whole lead will spin around the hook as you try to wrap it. So this just made it a lot easier to do that. And then I don't have to pinch down the tie-in end either. So one more wrap. You'll note every time that I cut wire or the lead stuff, I'm always using the very bottom end of the scissors so you don't ruin your points on a hard material. All right, right back to the back. Now again, the way Denny did his, he used a single color for the tail. And he says not to use this stuff at the tip up here because it's too soft and it tends to compact down when it's being stripped instead of breathing in the water. So he takes the barbs off the bottom of the marabou where the stem of these fibers is thicker. And again, I'm going to tie this tail maybe fairly short, just a little past shank length. A nice little pinch wrap. And then, as I say, hold it on the shank and just spiral up a little bit behind the lead. Cut the excess. Wrap it down. This time I'm going to wait to put the wire on. And I'm going to stick the orange in the middle of this one. Just a teeny bit of orange as a contrast. And back with the, oh, and I'm going to throw the, wherever that, my flash seems to keep wanting to disappear on me this morning. So again, a little crystal flash around the hook on one side, turn it off, and then on the other side. And wrapping the flash around the thread allows you to place where it goes onto the hook. So I'm doing that on either side. Trim it off. That guy's being uncooperative. Okay. So I have some flash. Now, if you're not doing the layering effect, you would strip all of the marabou off your stem at once. So I've just divided it up because I've got the flash in the middle, and I need the bulk. So again, I measure the first batch against the second for length. I'm down. Wrap it up the body a bit. Now my wire. Where is it here? So my wire's tied in right at the back. No, it's not. Let's try that again. Wind it right down to the back, pull it out of the way. And this time I've got orange hackle. Reasonable length. Strip all of the barbules off the back end. And when I tie this in, I'm going to take the more intensely colored side and it's going to face me and tie it in by the butt. And then form my dubbing loop.
Has anyone else lost audio?
Can you not hear me?
No? That's good.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, and again, take it up and tie there, and then do the one wrap over top of the pair of threads and around and wrap back. And now I can take my thread out of the way up to the front. And that, again, that wrap over top of the pair of threads is what allows you to have the loop close up where it's tight to the hook, instead of having it open up on you as you're trying to wrap and drop the material out. Again, back to the dubbing loop. It's hanging on the right side. Now, one of the nasty things is these things tend to spin on their own when you don't want them to. So I want to make sure the dubbing loop is open all the way up before I start putting stuff in. And my pre-mixed dubbing material. Now, I saw in Denny's tying video, he stuck it all in at once and then stretched it out. I tend to do it in little bits whenever I'm doing these spiky dubbings, because it gives me a little more control over how much I put in, and it keeps the diameter of the spun up rope more consistent. And if I keep shoving it up, and keep a little bit of tension on the loop, I can put it in at the bottom and slide it up near the top. And that'll hold all that stuff in there without falling on the floor. And I can sort of pick how much to put in the loop with each little bit, so that I can kind of control the width of the material. Okay. And then hold it by the spinning bead, give it a wrap. And you'll see how it, after you get it wrapped really, really good, it makes a nice little rope of dubbing. And again, we wrap forward. I don't think you have to do this so the body is a thing of beauty and enjoy forever. The idea of this fly is to have a little bit of roughness to it, I think. And all these fibers, they're going to trap air and it's going to sparkle some and it's going to breathe. I think that's why the seal fur works so well. This time I will overwrap because John was asking, I will overwrap the stem of the hackle. So we'll wrap the hackle first. So seeing that little piece of stem at the beginning makes all the difference in the world in that first wrap. Doesn't have to twist. and then the wire. And I'm going to counter wrap it. And as John said, I'm going to kind of wiggle it to get the hackle fibers not trapped. It's a little trickier to do that than it is the other way. That is really heavy wire. So my recommendation would use a light copper wire. A little bit of a head behind the eye, and then grip finish. I'll do a double. These bulky heads, I like to do a double whip finish. They don't always. The first 3 wrap one doesn't always line up right.
Dave, don't you ever use a bead head?
Yeah, this is a 2x long hook, so if you used a 3x long, you could do that. I think if you've got the wire on the body, it should sync pretty well. Again, I'm just roughing things up here a bit. There you go. One that's got some contrasting colors. That's kind of like a pumpkin head, eh? That's it.
Question, can you tell me why again the seal hair works so well? What's the benefit here?
Good question.
It just doesn't work.
It's just that it's got the right fineness of material, and it's stiff enough that it really fluffs out when you roughen it up like that. And I think a lot of materials like regular Antron and chenille and stuff like that, they don't create that real spiky body.
Dave, if I might comment here, John, if you go and Google Denny Rickards seal bugger, he gives you a very good explanation of why he uses seal. And he also has a video that shows the fly being pulled through the water.
Yeah,
and you can see the seal dubbing pulsating as he pulls it through the water. And he recommends that you use seal fur because it pulsates that way and gives it some life.
Yeah.
It's really instructive to have a look at his video. Google Denny Rickards seal bugger.
Yeah, I can make a few other comments about it because I have talked to Denny Rickards, and I do have his catalog of all the flies he ties and sells. And it's interesting. One of the interesting things is that in the US, you cannot get seal fur. And so some company invented this semi-seal stuff, which maybe works as well, I don't know. But I think the reason that you can get seal in Canada, but not the US, is in Canada, of course, the Inuit collect seal and and sell it for and eat it, you know. But in the US, they don't have that option.
So where would you get it?
Well, I think that one in Calgary, what is it? Canadian Llama.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's Calgary
No,
or not.
Canadian Llama doesn't have seal. I buy mine online. Usually there is an outfit in Quebec.
Oh,
Ami de Mouchard. Let me see if I can do a quick search for that, and I can show you the.
Tony, we have a very good fly shop here, Robinson's. They have all kinds of it.
I know. I
They
went
do,
online.
yeah.
I went online to try and order some stuff, but they didn't have much online.
Yeah.
Call Matt and talk to him personally.
Yeah, they have it at Robinson's.
So the stuff I
Yeah.
have is two suppliers. One is Superfly, which is an Edmonton-based fly tying materials wholesaler. And they sell that through the Fish and Hole. And I think, I don't know where Robinson's get his. The other is the Great Canadian Dubbing Company. And those are the wholesalers. And I think both of these I bought through the Fish and Hole, both of the types.
I got one sealed through Robinson's, and it was the first.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
one, the Superfly.
And then this other stuff is an Umpcore product. That's the Crystal Seal.
Okay.
Can I make a comment about the orange hackle that you've used?
Yep.
Sometimes that's a bit tricky to get a hold of.
Yeah.
But if you just get a standard grizzly hackle and get orange Kool-Aid, it dyes it really well. And Denny Rickards is really hot on orange as the hackle color. If you look at his catalog,
Yeah.
most of his seal buggers have orange in them. And his theory is, well, maybe if it's imitating a shrimp, you know, the shrimp have that egg sac in the back of them, which is kind of an orange color. But who knows?
So being a contrarian while we're talking, I've tied one myself, but I've done it orange and with a bead head. And I have used mohair, which I use a lot instead of seal. And this is what came up for me.
I think it's the contrast and the orange color is more visible at depth.
Mm.
We do know that the pumpkin heads work. And tequila bluebies. So there's something about that color of orange.
Yeah. Kool-Aid.
So Dave, here's the turbo dubbing. Shall I do a quick loop?
Sure.
So Florin, you're still sharing your screen. I can't see anything else.
Is this? No, it says something about, let me just go again, resume share. No, there's something about the order in which I have to do this. Let me try again.
It's okay. We're good now. Thanks. We're good
Is
now.
it visible now?
Yeah, everybody's visible now. Thanks.
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now we're back to you again. Yeah.
There, that's good.
And do you see my dubbing setup?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the ingredients are this complicated looking tool, which is really nothing but a block of wood that's going to hold up your dubbing and wire. And then this little thing at the end, which is really, this is the heart of the thing. It's a spinning tool. And I think one of the weighted things that Dave showed, if you have already a dubbing spinner like that, a manual one, you can probably improvise a wooden structure to hold things up and use that as a spinner, you know. So it's a fairly simple tool. This just looks complicated because one day I went into the fishing hole and I was weak and I spent the $50 or whatever it was 10 years ago. So this is how this little thing works. You take the wire, and I'm just using regular small size uni in red. So anything works. You want the wire to be fine enough so that eventually after you spin it hard enough, it'll break. So you attach the wire at one end here, put it around the pin, and down the middle of this channel. And this is where the dubbing is going to go. So you should be able to sort of glimpse the wire there in the middle. And then temporarily attach it to this other side. Okay, so what I've got now is I've got the wire running from here to here and I put it through this hook. Okay. And now I take my dubbing, which is a mixed affair in this particular case. So it's seal fur with a bit of sparkly bits in it. So red and black with a bit of red sparkly material. And I'm just going to lay it on top in a very fine, so just think the same way you'd be making a dubbing loop. You just go easy, you don't put too much stuff. So you just put it there on top, and it's just going to sit on top of the wood, and the wire is going to be all in that channel underneath. And keep putting on the dubbing. I'm doing this fairly heavy. Okay, and when you come to the end, so now you're at the end of making your dubbing loop. So you take the wire and you lift it from the holder while still keeping it here in the hook. And see why a spool keeper is handy. Then you take the wire and you fold it back over the top of the dubbing. So it goes right on top of the first bit of wire that you lay down. So then you just hold it in your hand. Now you don't have to really do anything. And then you start spinning from this end. So you spin, 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 spin. And at some point, once you, so see the dubbing loop is now inside the channel. You can't really see an awful lot, but the dubbing brush is now almost ready. So just keep spinning, and at some point it's going to break. This is wire. Okay, there we are. It broke off. And I trimmed the other end. And here's the dubbing brush. Maybe I should put it on a contrasting. So that's it. And you just build a bunch of these ahead of time in the colors of your choice. And I sometimes use these dubbing brushes if I tie big, like stone flies. When it comes to the thorax, I like to use brown seal fur. And I have dubbing brushes pre-tied with the right color. And it just makes the flight. And because what happens is, if you like to use seal fur, you know that it's a really tough one to spin if you just do regular dubbing. The dubbing loop is going to be a little bit better, but just spinning it on the thread is usually a royal pain to get it right. And so I find that the dubbing brushes work very well for the larger flies. I wouldn't attempt this on the small nymphs, but on the big stuff is my favorite way to go. And I also use as I told you earlier, I use a spool keeper on the wire. This way the wire never unravels on me. And when I do this kind of stuff, it's also super handy. So that's how it's done. And I'll try, actually, because I was talking to the guys here in Edmonton, I'm gonna try to see if I can use a regular dubbing spinner to mount it with 2 pieces of wood in some way to do the same, to do the same job. And the dubbing spinner I'm talking about, I think Dave showed you one just like this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's the one that's got a wheel, a little bearing in it, and it's quite heavy. And what I'm thinking of doing, this is essentially the business end of this tool, right? If you just mounted this in a similar way at the end of some wooden structure, you should be able to achieve the same results. At least that's the theory.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same thing here.
Yeah, that's the one.
Got a
I
little,
like it. It's very smooth spinning.
got a nice little ball bearing in there with a shaft. And the nice thing about this is you can put all your dubbing loop in and then you can pull it. And these things close up the dubbing loop completely. And then when you spin, there's no danger of the stuff dropping out of the loop.
Yeah.
Dave, have you got a brand name, or do you remember what that one is?
There's a couple of, this one is the more expensive guy, but there is a less expensive one on the market that has interchangeable little things that go on the end. I don't know what the brand name is.
Okay.
Dubbing's and I know that Robinson's has this particular guy in stock. And that one, you don't pull on it, you just hang it down because it's fairly hefty and give it a spin and it just goes, spins around by itself. And it's not too expensive. I know they've got that one in stock.
Right, but it doesn't close.
The tongs don't close on it?
Oh, yes, they do. They squeeze together.
Oh, okay.
Hey, also guys, just for learning from my side, I moved downstairs closer to the Wi-Fi, and now I've got tons of bandwidth. I checked with the speed test again, and I'm up to 250 megabytes per second. So even when I was upstairs, even though the connection Wi-Fi symbol showed that I had all 4 bars, that doesn't mean that you have the connection. I don't know why. Normally you have normally you'll have 1 or 2 bars if it's a poor connection, but maybe that's with the.
My guess, John, is that you have a reinforced concrete slab between the downstairs and the upstairs.
No.
And that, is it wood?
Yeah. So when we lived in Qatar, all the buildings there were a concrete pole and cinder block and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess it was like living inside a Faraday cage, which is why we had 3 Wi-Fi routers in the house just to go and get some signal. Yeah.
So you might want to put a booster or stick one of those routers upstairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or live downstairs.
Yeah. Or live downstairs. There we go.
So I've recorded most of this section, but I forgot the first 2 minutes again. I'm sorry about that, but I got it recording after I moved downstairs. So in the weekly newsletter, I'll send the link to the recording if people want to play it back.
Sounds good.
I just want to give a shout out to Dennis, who showed that trick with flattening the lead, I think a couple of weeks ago, to make his special fly. And in fact, he did both ends, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thank you.
You're
welcome.
Just paying attention, show that I was paying attention at least. Couldn't do it to save my life, but
Sandy, you may have explained your background. How do you do that?
Virtual background.
Well,
Sandy, you're on mute.
He's on mute. Hello. Still on mute.
Took me a minute to find my cursor to unmute.
Oh,
You go up into your settings and click a little wheel up there, and you'll find that off on the left-hand side, I'm just trying to do it by memory because I'm not looking at it. There's a whole bunch of settings. One is including background, and they have a few stock backgrounds, and then you can upload a picture. And I've uploaded a range of pictures, so depending on which kind of Zoom meeting I'm on, I choose the appropriate background.
Okay, and you say you go up to your the top of your computer, your window. There's a bar which has got the Zoom reference bar. Is that where you go?
Yeah,
it's a cogwheel for settings, and again, Mike Corey's got problems. Tried to do it, but he couldn't do it because he doesn't have the horsepower in the computer to do the graphics. Neither do I.
And I wasn't able to do it on my laptop because I didn't have the horsepower either.
Sandy, I found that when I went on my laptop, I went to next to where it says unmute, where the microphone is. Next to that in the bottom left is the video icon.
Yeah.
And if you go to the little arrow next to the right of the video icon,
Right.
it also has virtual background in there. It's another way to do it.
Oh, thank you. That's easier to get to too.
Yeah.
Yep. There you
And
go.
then you do have to have some pictures of your own. I think there's one or two of mine. That
Yeah,
is
choose
started.
virtual background. Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to do it. Thanks, Wendy.
You're welcome.
I've lost it. Can't find it.
Worked for me. Good. Maybe you have to have it switched on first in settings, and then you can toggle on or off through that button.
Okay, I'll fish around. I'll find it.
Mhm.
Anyway, excellent talk, guys.
Yeah, good stuff.
Very good.
Dave?
Once
Stuff,
again,
guys.
the master has taught us something.
I learn something every time. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Very good, interesting.
Yeah, now I'll go tie a few flies. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Tuesday.
Have to run.
I did a
Thanks.
dozen and a half last weekend. It's very stimulating.
Thanks to all that contributed.
Ice on the lakes helps too.
So any suggestions you have for pattern next week, let me know. Otherwise, I'll have to rack my brain for something unusual.
There's my version of your fly.
Not many guys use dry flies, do they?
I do.
We're going into dry fly season, though.
Oh, Dave.
Hey, guys. Thank you.
Here's a
Bye-bye.
simple one to do if you haven't done yet. A CFF.
You can do a CFF if you want. It's not my favorite fly.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you could do that.
CFF, and the other one that's since you're doing seal fur today. Mike Dell has this thing he calls a Norm Special from a friend of his, which is a thorax of seal fur behind a bead and an abdomen of, sorry, the other way around, an abdomen of brown seal fur and a thorax of peacock. And it's a beadhead nymph, and it's super simple and super effective. And Mike is kind of like using this as a universal fly from size 14, 16 to up to, I've seen big hunking size 6 or 8. He says they're good for stone flies too.
Or I could do a Cardiff Special.
Or you could do that, yeah.
Yeah, use a little mallard flank and some yellow and green dubbing. Yeah, that would work too. Cardiff Special. But it would be good for the lakes here as well in the darker yellow colors.
Yeah, this is more of a stream nymph, the one I'm talking about. It's usually it's a killer thing in the foothills here.
Yeah.
So whenever, yeah.
But yeah, we could do two next week. I could do a Cardiff Special and you can do a CFF.
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty quick.
For the guys that don't know, the CFF, it actually stands for the 100 fish fly.
And the only ingredient that you need to have is some macrame yarn, preferably in what. So the basic fly needs 2 hard to get ingredients, and that's brown and white macrame yarn. Now I suspect any kind of crinkly yarn that makes a fly float should work.
Yeah, good. A spiky antron would work too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good antron or polypropylene or whatever. You just need to make sure that it's not the kind of stuff that soaks up water and then gets matted and wet. This is a fly that you don't use floatant on, basically, other than a little bit on the body.
Yep. So just send me the pattern information and I'll post it to the site.
Okay, I'll do that. And with the, I think Don Anderson still has it on his website.
Yeah.
The link to his, originating story on the Crow's Nest River and all that good stuff.
for those of you who don't know Don Anderson, he's a well-known fly fisherman and cane rod builder out of the Rocky Mountain House area.
Okay, thanks, guys. I gotta go. Sorry.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Kyle. Gotta leave.
Thanks, David. Cheers.